Hey guys, tonight we stand before the looming gates of Hoa Lo Prison, a place once called the Hell on Earth of Hanoi. The iron bars stretch higher than you'd expect, jagged spikes reaching into the night sky, as if the building itself wanted to keep every soul inside from ever escaping. The air is heavy, the kind of weight that presses down on your chest, and the silence feels unnatural, as if the walls are still listening. You can almost hear a faint rattle of chains in the distance, though no one is there. This is not a place you could easily walk through and expect to leave unchanged. In fact, if you were locked behind those bars even for a single night, you probably wouldn't survive. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, let me know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what time is it where you are? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The gates groan as they open in your imagination. Beyond them, the stone courtyard waits, the walls looming with centuries of grief pressed into their mortar. The French built this place long ago, but its shadow stretches far beyond their empire. Inside, each corridor leads deeper into suffocation. The smell of damp brick, iron rust, and something faintly metallic lingers, impossible to ignore. It feels less like walking into a prison and more like stepping into a mouth that swallows you whole. The stories buried in these walls are many, but to understand why the spirits still scream here, we must begin at the moment of its birth. In the late 19th century, when French colonial rule gripped Vietnam, Hanoi became the chosen stage for one of the most feared creations of the empire. The prison, that would later be known as Hoa Lo, began as a cold, calculated design not merely to hold criminals, but to silence dissent, to break the spirit of anyone who dared resist. Its very name, Hoa Lo, originally meant fiery furnace, a reference to the kilns once common in the area. But in time, the name would come to symbolize something far darker, a place where human hope itself was burned to ashes. Constructed with thick stone walls, barred windows, and iron doors that clanged shut with a finality few could endure, it was designed to hold about 450 inmates. Yet within years, the population swelled into the thousands. Men and women, young and old, were crammed together, their voices echoing against the damp bricks. The French administrators knew what they were doing. Overcrowding was not a failure, it was a weapon. Every corner of Hoa Lo spoke of deliberate cruelty. Windows were placed high, not to let in light, but to remind prisoners of how far away the sky really was. The courtyards were narrow, built less for movement than for surveillance. Even the drains beneath the floors carried more than water. They carried whispers of escape attempts and the stench of decay that never truly left. The French called it Maison Centrale, a deceptively soft name that made it sound like a simple correctional facility. But the locals had another term for it, the Hell's Dungeon. And though the prison's walls were solid stone, they absorbed more than screams. They absorbed the despair of a generation. That despair would linger long after the empire itself crumbled. Step past the outer courtyard, and the air thickens even more. The corridors here are narrow, suffocating, each doorway leading into cells so small they feel less like rooms and more like tombs. Stone floors, damp with humidity, pressed against the bare skin of prisoners who were forced to lie on them night after night. Along the walls, rows of iron shackles remained fixed to the ground. each one held ankles in place so tightly that even shifting to relieve pain was impossible. Imagine being chained in a row, shoulder to shoulder with dozens of others, the smell of sweat, fear, and unwashed wounds filling the darkness. Light rarely touched these cells. The only illumination came from a thin slit near the ceiling, so high that no prisoner could ever reach it. Through that slit came a faint glimmer in the day, or the occasional moonbeam at night. Prisoners learned quickly that the small window was not meant for comfort. It was a reminder of the freedom just out of reach. Food was sparse, and when it came, it was often little more than watery gruel crawling with insects. Water for drinking and bathing was rationed, forcing people to live in filth. Rats scurried freely across the floors, sometimes gnawing at sleeping prisoners. In the stillness of the night, the scratching of claws became part of the soundscape of survival. Some cells were worse than others. The solitary confinement rooms were like coffins built of stone, designed to strip away the mind as well as the body. A man could sit there for weeks, unable to stand fully, unable to breathe fresh air. It was here that many whispered they began to hear voices, not always their own, not always from the living. In Hoa Lo, silence was never empty. It was heavy, vibrating with sorrow and something else, something that still lingers in those dark cells today. Yet, even within the suffocating grip of Hoa Lo, the human spirit did not vanish. The French filled these cells with revolutionaries, men and women who dared to dream of a Vietnam free from colonial rule. They were shackled, starved, and beaten, but their voices refused to be silenced. At night, when the guards' footsteps faded, whispers spread from one prisoner to another. Messages of encouragement, songs of resistance softly hummed, and secret plans carried on in the darkness. Some prisoners scratched words into the stone walls with bits of metal, leaving behind fragments of poetry, fragments of hope. Others tapped on the bricks, using coded knocks to communicate between cells. These were not idle gestures. Every whisper and every scratch carried defiance. They were small rebellions that the French could not chain. Women, too, endured the cruelty of Hoa Lo. Many were held in separate quarters, subjected to the same hunger and disease, but they became symbols of endurance. Mothers gave birth inside these walls, raising newborns in the shadow of despair, proof that life could still emerge from suffering. There were moments when entire groups rose together in defiance. Hunger strikes rattled the prison, with men collapsing in rows but refusing to give in. Smuggled notes and makeshift tools hinted at escape attempts, though most ended in failure. Still, the courage to try was itself a statement. The French authorities may have built Hoa Lo as a dungeon to crush resistance, but in time it became a crucible, shaping stories of sacrifice that would fuel the fight for independence. And while many of those voices never left the prison alive, their presence clung to the stones. Some say that's why, even now, when you walk through those corridors, you hear faint murmurs of conversations that should have died decades ago. Deeper within the prison stood a room unlike the rest. Its walls were bare, its air unnaturally cold, and in the center loomed the most feared object of all, the guillotine. Imported from France, its wooden frame towered above the floor, the heavy blade gleaming faintly under the dim light. Prisoners called it the Machine of Silence, for once it was wheeled into place, the end was certain. Executions were carried out with grim efficiency. Guards would drag the condemned into the chamber, chain them down, and force them to kneel beneath the waiting blade. The sound that followed, a sharp metallic crash, would echo down the corridors, reminding every other prisoner of what awaited those who resisted too fiercely. The guillotine did not just kill, it spread terror far beyond the execution room. For the revolutionaries, death beneath the blade was both feared and embraced. Many went to their end-chanting slogans, refusing to let the French claim their final word. Still, the machine claimed countless lives, and with each soul taken, the chamber grew heavier, as though the air itself absorbed the weight of grief. Even today, the guillotine remains on display at Hoa Lo, its wood worn and its blade dulled with time. Tourists who step into the room describe a chill, a sensation of unseen eyes pressing against their back. Some swear they hear faint screams, not loud, but hushed, as if the walls themselves whisper reminders of the condemned. The guillotine may no longer fall, but its shadow stretches endlessly. And for those who walk past it at night, that shadow feels alive, as though the machine still waits, patient and hungry, for another offering.
As decades passed, Hoa Lo's purpose shifted. When the war with the United States erupted, the prison took on a new name among American pilots, the Hanoi Hilton. It was here that downed aviators, shot from the skies over Vietnam, were brought in chains through the same gates that had once held revolutionaries. For them, the prison was a paradox, both infamous and oddly familiar. Inside, the Americans encountered the same stone walls, the same suffocating cells, though their treatment was a complicated mixture of propaganda and punishment. Officially, the Vietnamese authorities wanted to show the world that prisoners of war were treated with humanity. Unofficially, many endured long stretches of isolation, interrogations, and the same gnawing hunger that had haunted the prison since the French days. Some captives carved messages into the walls, much like the revolutionaries before them. Others, cut off from the outside world, created entire routines inside their minds, repeating stories, building imaginary homes, or reciting books they had once read, word for word, to hold on to sanity. A handful of American prisoners later described hearing strange sounds at night, faint chains dragging across empty corridors, footsteps that halted just outside the cell door, and whispers in a language they did not understand. Whether these were tricks of a restless mind or something much older lingering in the prison remains uncertain. One prisoner, years after his release, confessed that the scariest moments were not the interrogations, but the silences. The quiet never felt empty, he admitted. It felt like the place was breathing. And perhaps it was. The Americans had stepped into a dungeon already haunted by generations of suffering. They merely became the next layer of voices pressed into its walls.
When night settles over Hoa Lo, the silence becomes something else entirely. Visitors who have walked through the museum after dark describe a weight in the air, the kind that makes the skin prickle before a sound is even heard. Then, faintly, it begins. Footsteps along the corridor, slow and deliberate, though no one is there to cast a shadow. Some say they hear chains dragging across the floor, a metallic scrape that fades just as you turn your head. Others report low murmurs in languages long gone, as though voices from both colonial days and wartime overlap in whispers.
These sounds never arrive all at once. They come in fragments, scattered and thin, forcing listeners to question whether they are truly imagined. There are stories of guards, long after the prison closed, refusing to patrol alone. One man recalled seeing a figure in a prison uniform slip past the corner of his vision, only to vanish when he ran after it. Tourists, too, sometimes leave pale and shaken. A few have sworn that when they looked into the solitary confinement cells, someone was already standing inside, unmoving, waiting. The air itself seems charged in certain hallways. Lights flicker more often than elsewhere, as though the building resists being lit. A sudden gust of cold can sweep through even on the hottest days of Hanoi's summer. Those who linger too long claim they hear not just whispers, but screams, faint, stretched and distant like echoes trapped deep in the stone. And perhaps that is the truth of Hoa Lo. The walls are not empty. They are filled with voices that never left, drifting endlessly through the corridors, searching for ears willing to listen. Beneath the prison, hidden from the eyes of casual visitors, ran a system of drains and sewers. On the surface, they were meant to carry away the filth of overcrowded cells, but for desperate prisoners, they offered something far more valuable: the faint hope of escape. Many whispered about these dark passages, though few dared to test them. The drains were narrow, suffocating tunnels of stone and stagnant water. Prisoners who tried to squeeze through them often found themselves crawling in total darkness, the air hot and foul, with only the sound of dripping water to guide them. Those who entered knew there was little chance of returning. If they weren't caught, they risked becoming lost beneath the city itself, swallowed by the labyrinth below. Yet the most chilling tales spoke not of suffocation or capture, but of something alive in the water. Hanoi's rivers were once home to crocodiles, and legends say some found their way into the underground channels. Whispers spread among prisoners that a crocodile lurked in the drains beneath Hoa Lo, feeding on those who dared to escape. Whether fact or rumor, the fear was powerful enough to stop many from even trying. There are records of a handful who made it out, crawling through filth, emerging in distant parts of the city under the cover of night. But for every successful escape, many more vanished, their names etched only in memory. Guards often joked cruelly about the drains, suggesting the dungeon itself swallowed those who disobeyed. Today, when visitors peer into the remnants of those underground passages, they see nothing but blackness. Still, if you listen long enough, some claim you can hear faint splashes, as though something stirs just below the surface, waiting.
Even with its transformation into a museum, Hoa Lo has never shed the weight of what it once was. Locals speak quietly about the energy that clings to the place, an energy too dense to simply fade with time. They believe that the spirits of those who perished here, revolutionaries, prisoners, innocents, and condemned alike, still wander within the walls. Some claim to hear cries rising suddenly in the middle of the night, even from outside the museum gates. Taxi drivers have reported avoiding the street after dark, saying their cars stall or their headlights flicker when passing the entrance. A few workers tasked with maintaining the site admit they never stay alone after hours. They talk of icy hands brushing against them, of voices calling their names when no one else was near. The belief is not rooted only in superstition. For many Vietnamese families, the stories of loved ones lost in Hoa Lo are still recent memories. To them, the haunting is not a ghost tale. It is grief that refuses to be silenced. And so, the prison lives on as more than just a landmark,
It is a reminder that suffering leaves echoes and that some echoes never fade. Tourists may come seeking history, but they often leave with something else. The uneasy sense that the screams of Hoa Lo still rise in the night air, carried endlessly through the city that grew around it. The dungeon may no longer hold prisoners, but its ghosts remain locked inside, restless, waiting, reminding us that not all doors ever truly close.
And so, as the final echoes drift from the corridors of Hoa Lo, we step gently back into the present. The weight of its history lingers, yes, but the night no longer presses quite so heavily. The screams that once shook its walls fade to a low hum, like distant thunder retreating beyond the horizon. What remains is not terror, but memory, soft, solemn, and still. Think of the iron gates now, closed but quiet. Think of the stone floors, no longer bearing shackled feet, but instead the careful steps of visitors, walking slowly, respectfully. The guillotine rests in silence, its blade lowered, its hunger gone, and the voices, those countless voices that once filled every corner, now sound more like faint whispers carried on a breeze. They are not here to frighten, but to remind. The spirits of Hoa Lo may still wander, but they wander with stories that need to be heard. Stories of courage, of survival, of sorrow that runs deep. And perhaps, if you listen closely, you'll find that what echoes most strongly is not their suffering, but their endurance. So as the night deepens, let the noise of the world grow softer. Let the images dissolve like mist lifting in the morning sun. Close your eyes and breathe, slowly, calmly, knowing that you are safe. The dungeon is far away now, its shadows retreating with each passing second. Drift gently and let the stillness take you. Good night, my friends. Sleep well.